So hi everyone, welcome to Talking Tech with Legal IT Insider. I'm your host Caroline Hill. It's great to be here. Today we've got a really fascinating webinar looking at general purpose versus professional grade legal AI. So as you know, as Gen AI continues to reshape the legal landscape, one big question is whether lawyers can/should rely on general purpose tools like ChatGPT. Sometimes they're seen as good enough. They're crucially free. Thomson Reuters are here to present their case for professional grade AI solutions tailored to the legal profession. And we will be looking at the capabilities of co-counsel compared with generic tools. So my speakers today, many of you will know them. Someone commented in the chat about the very famous Ben Firth, Director of Sales and Customer Success at Thomson Reuters. Ben joined Thomson Reuters through its acquisition with HiQ. Apparently, he's called the HiQ guy. He was also head of customer success at HiQ. And in the legal sector, he's held roles at Doc Auto and also Ticket, which many of you will remember. Hi, Ben.
Hey, nice to see you again.
Nice to see you again. Yes, it's not our first rodeo. Tim Coles is Legal Business Development Executive at Thomson Reuters. He's been with Thomson Reuters over 9 years, including more recently, helping with co-counsel, helping clients with co-counsel. And he was previously a solicitor with Field Fisher. Hi, Tim.
How you doing, Caroline? Nice to see you.
Yeah, really nice to see you. Thanks for joining me. So great to have many people here today, so it's going to be an interactive session. Please ask questions as we go. This is a really important topic, just in terms of how things are going to go, the agenda. So we're going to be talking about some findings, sort of broad findings from Thomson Reuters Institute's latest reports about adoption trends, and some stats. We're going to be defining a little bit what we mean within some of this conversation in terms of what we're comparing. We've got some data in terms of who's using what, who's buying what, who's downloading what, who's using what. A few pros and cons of each, which would be really interesting. And then a little bit of a demo at the end of co-counsel. So by all means, jump in. So to start with then, so should we dive into some adoption trends to kick us off?
Yeah, we can do. I think what would be really interesting just to say at this stage, it's defining is an interesting word at the moment. I think we're interpreting, let's call it that. I think it's probably a better way and a safer way to start by saying we're interpreting. And I think the way that this market is and the technology space, I would probably say, like I was saying earlier, that if anybody watches this on a catch-up channel, they might be disappointed because the tech is going so fast. The changes are daily, hourly at some stages in certain areas, that whatever we talk about today, maybe fish and chip wrapper tomorrow, right? And so I think that's just really important to state as we kind of go through where we're at. I think what we wanted to do first of all is we'll get into that data point because that's really important. I think the subject of general purpose versus professional grade is what we want to delve into. But I thought what we'll probably start off is interpreting or defining what the differences are actually, and then we'll look at some of that data. So I hope that's all right, Caroline, in terms of that, the order of which we go. So hopefully you see my screen.
We get to do what we want to do in this webinar, and that's a great thing about it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's really important to understand the market itself at the moment is buoyant, it's wild. It's exciting, and I think if I take a step back and Tim will say the same, that of the technology we work in, and just look at the actual technology in the space and what it's doing to the industry, it's so exciting, right? It's so exciting. It's moving the dial faster than anything in the past, and that's something to behold, right? And that's something to be proud of as an industry. And we're all part of that, and the audience as well as part of that. But in terms of what we're going to cover, definitely that we're going to cover a bit about the definitions or the interpretations I just said, and how does it stack up in that comparison, and then we'll look at some examples and look at some data behind the scenes. So I guess Tim and I, we talk about this quite a lot, don't we, about the definitions of what it is, and interpretations. And maybe, Caroline, if we look at the chat in the chat window, people might throw their own interpretations of what those are as well into the mixer. And it'd be really good if we could get some of that feedback as we go. But, general purpose versus professional grade. General purpose, I mean, Tim, where do you think we should start on defining what general purpose is in in the legal space. What do you think? Are you there? Oh, Tim's gone quiet. Tim's gone. Tim has gone frozen on us.
Anything that's not legal specific.
Anything that's not legal specific. Yeah, I would say so. So yeah, look, I mean, general purpose. We were looking at this. We were talking about this one. So the obvious ones at the moment in the market: ChatGPT, Copilot. Those are often financially low to entry market platforms that are traditionally trained on a generic source of data. They're not specifically focused on one area of the legal market. And obviously the professional grade is something along the lines of, for example, co-counsel or other alternatives. And I'm going to dig into this in a bit more detail shortly. But really, it's a case of that one size fits all approach around the general purpose that will solve many of the challenges, both in and out of legal. But also the professional grade it goes that extra mile in serving the challenges within the legal framework. So what we tried to do early on was to kind of do some kind of comparison around this. Tim, welcome back. You've just joined us back into the webinar.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not sure. Technical fault. I'm back here, back in the game.
There we go. There we go. So what we're trying to do is trying to help people who are coming in, is trying to gauge the differences. And one thing that we've seen is, and I'll come into the data later on, is the adoption or the entry to market is in the general purpose space. I think I've got a stat that'll come to later. About 35% of law firms are using general purpose AI platforms today in the market. So that's a really interesting stat. So the general purpose is the entry point to anything, whether it be Copilot or GPT or something else. So we were looking at all these different ways of categorizations, and again, this isn't an applied science. This is an applied logic around where we sit in the market and when we listen to our clients around gauging some of those reactions. And we thought we'd kind of go through this, didn't we, Tim, about comparing some of these columns around the different facets around general purpose versus professional grade. So left-hand side are some of the areas that we would probably say, if I was in your shoes as the audience, things to think about. When you're going down a buying decision, you need to think about multiple things. And yes, obviously, reliability, accuracy are probably up there at the top because that's what the technology is really driven towards. But there's also some peripherals that some people get swept up in and some people aren't thinking about as they're going through that, let's call it selection criteria. So let's talk about it. So it's like product support. General purpose, it's going to be pretty limited, right? I don't know how much support a lawyer would get from a ChatGPT answer if they were questioning it, or the infrastructure or the reliability and so forth. Whereas in the tech space, something that legal tech providers like ourselves and others in the market almost take pride in is generally around the contract we give our clients, the client success programs, the elevated experience. I mean, Tim, from your background, maybe just explain a bit about your background and how you come into the legal space to help guide our clients that might help in this space.
Yeah, so I've only been in legal tech for 9 months, which is nothing compared to Ben and some of you. But, in that time, just to echo Ben's comments from earlier, it's increased exponentially. The things you can do and the things that you can play with, the sheer capability of the technology just increases, and that's not going to slow down. But there are some important kind of anchors to this, I think, and I think customer success is a really important one. As Ben says, a ChatGPT typically won't give you much in the way of customer support, but this is a very, very tactile product. It's not the same as a practical law where you kind of search and find information, for example. The exercise of prompting, particularly when you first use it, needs a bit of hand-holding. It needs a bit of refinement. Typically, sometimes it's useful to have somebody within the vendor's tool who can talk to you from the inside and really help you get the best out of it. And again, come back to what I said at the start, it's a technology we haven't seen before. It's new, exciting. In some ways, gives people reason to be quite cautious, and rightfully so. But that's really where that value add comes in. You're investing not just in a technology, but in the support that goes towards helping you get the best of it and its refinement.
And I think that's the same for legal tech across the whole portfolio, right? So software as a service, and part of that software experience you're buying into is that customer success program. So look, the costs, like general purpose is free or low cost entry points, as we've said. In comparison, this is a new technology in the market across us and other vendors. Yeah, some people, the initial look might go, hang on a second, that's why am I spending X amount more versus that I can get it for free with my subscription with Microsoft or wherever it might be. And it's really about that investment in that service and that experience you're getting. And maybe we'll come on to that one. Functionality. We were looking at this in terms of the differences in functionality from a general purpose. It's industry agnostic, right? It doesn't know all the nuances of being a lawyer. And some would argue it doesn't matter, right? It's trained on its LLM and it's pulling in that data. But as we'll discuss later, as you get into the weeds and the deeper kind of challenges around extracting data or working in a legal framework, you're going to need some focus. And that is where that professional grade really starts to elevate or separate that experience between the two platforms. And then part of that really is about modeling, isn't it, Tim? We were looking at about the different models in the market and what we talked about. So what we thoughts about the modeling situation?
Well, firstly, you can use the different models kind of in isolation. You can run one alongside the other at the same time and compare the outputs. I mean, that's all really useful. But what you get with professional grade typically is the benefit of the vendor selecting the best LLM for the job. So, I mean, again, I'm going to talk about CoCounsel, obviously, because that's our product. But where, say, the reviewing skill works particularly well with a particular LLM, we test that ourselves, and that's what we deliver to the end user. If a different LLM works particularly well with comparing documents, that's what we deliver too. So you get the benefit of our expertise and some reassurance that you're given the best tools for the job, which you wouldn't necessarily get or see or necessarily have the means to kind of distinguish kind of on your own and by using those free models.
Yeah, and that's something that we've seen, and other vendors in the market, and very much part of that process as well. When we look at the next two rows, they kind of come together: accuracy, reliability, and then source. Right, these three areas are actually quite a big subject, and again, there's some really interesting components around that, around what we're talking about here. And often when we talk to clients, yeah, tech is tech, right? But what we're finding in the market is we're almost talking about trust. We're talking about accuracy. We're talking about, well, how did it get that answer? Where's the source coming from? Where are you finding this result? And so for our side, in terms of how we train it and how we reduce the risk is very important to us, but also the source data. And it's no secret where we get our source from, okay, is from Westlaw and Practical Law, right? It's two of the largest legal information service providers in the world, I guess. So, you know, we have a wealth of data backed over years and years that is used in so many different facets in the legal industry. And that really is the underpinning of our source, isn't it, Tim, in terms of what we do? And you're from that background.
Yeah, I'm practical law, and look, I can tell you as a practical law editor, we train the practical law model and the practical law search and summarize tool all the time manually. We're constantly grading it, comparing it against previous answers, and it just gets better and better. But that brings us on to verification. You know, one of the kind of big value adds generative AI is said to offer professionals is that time-saving piece. You know, being able to do things, find information more efficiently. To me, that gets slightly unpicked if you're not given the means to verify that information. Supposing you input a contract into a free LLM, one which isn't equipped with something like footnotes, for example, which takes you to the particular extract, the particular document it's found its answer from. I mean, it's great to be told, yeah, the contract says this, but then as soon as you have to go into that contract, suddenly that time savings starts to deteriorate, particularly when you've got, you know, a bundle of 100, whatever it may be. And it's not just that verification exercise too. It's also being able to navigate, steer around those large document bundles and really being given the tools to do that. And again, CoCounsel, other vendors' tools typically have been designed with this in mind, the ability to verify the output and what you're being told. That is often a calling card, a hallmark of these professional grade tools, and one we think is really, really important. And I think kind of shows we've had lawyers in mind when we designed this. But
Yeah, I
security
think
always top of mind.
security is security, next one in there for us. And this is something we talk about a lot. And it's been really interesting in the last 12 months. I would say, and maybe the audience would agree, the complexity of the security questionnaires that we're getting are growing and growing and deeper and deeper. And I think that's really a really interesting sign that the industry is learning so much more about the challenge and also taking more sort of ownership and responsibility about what's happening with their data, because law firms, their power is their knowledge, right? And so they want to be making sure that if they're moving their data into these platforms, that it is in the right place, the right security location, and it's used in the right ways. And from our side, from a professional grade side, you know, we take that very, very seriously, and we treat the data of our clients with the strictest confidentiality. We're not training on it. We're simply using it to allow the lawyer to process their challenge. Let's call it that. And in the general purpose, That is a bit of an unknown, I'll be honest, in terms of what's happening with that data. And I think that would vary between different platforms. And I think there's something that would be lots of, you'd have to spend a lot of time really looking into the T's and C's of those platforms to give you those answers. And then finally, indemnity. Risk and indemnity and the insurance around the data processing is something that's becoming a bit of a topic, let's call it, around using these sorts of platforms in a professional way, let's call it. I have heard, Caroline, I don't know if you heard this, in the US, there seems to be a bit of a cottage industry growing around indemnity insurance in the world of AI. There's a lot more eyes in that space now around, well, hang on, if it's inaccurate, who's at fault? What's going on with the process around it, and who's insuring me against it? So there's a bit of a resurgence of industry in America at the moment, and I'm wondering if this will come to UK European shores at some stage. Who knows? But so look, we've literally just cast a few areas of interest that I think consumers or buyers or law firm departments probably should think about and really probe into as you're going through your buyer's journey, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Go for it, Caroline. You're going to jump in.
Thanks. So with the sourcing, isn't it right that ChatGPT more recently has? So obviously we've had lots of ChatGPT typically is the LLM that has been in a lot of cases in terms of hallucination, and they gave some kind of like reference, but I think they've actually improved their sourcing. No, I don't know if you've been following that, but they now provide citation, page number, that kind of thing. I wasn't sure whether that sort of what impact that had.
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. I think they are growing in accuracy, let's call it that, as is every platform, and they are releasing new features all the time. Like I said, like 10 minutes ago, there's things rolling out all the time. I saw this amazing OpenAI contract tool or something that was like launched last week or something. So yeah, is the answer. But I think it would come back to, okay, it's putting in the verifications, but then you go back into the sources. Well, where are those sources coming from? Is it safeguarded information that's trusted through Westlaw or Practical Law? Is it public open source that they've scraped from the internet? So there's something in there, and I guess it's
there's a lot more public case law available now. But so I think that there is a lot more data for them to be drawing from. I think
absolutely
in the UK, I know in the US, I think the position's been better, but obviously you do a huge amount of work behind the scenes in order to make that. There's a lot of work that Thomson Reuters does clearly in order to improve the data and therefore improve the accuracy. I just want to ask you about the indemnity though on that page. So I get the point that the word defensible comes up quite a bit in terms of, if you use a legal tool, like for example co-counsel, then it's more defensible. What does it mean in terms of indemnity? So so does that mean, so who's going to indemnify? Is that from an insurance perspective, or is that?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I mean, look, this is something that, when people take contracts with tech companies, there is an element of risk and indemnity where we will insure against work and so forth. And so, and I think that's a subject that, definitely not, we don't want to get into the weeds of, financial contract policies and so forth right now, but it's something that it seems to be a conversation that we seem to be hearing quite a lot, and it's growing. And again, I was working with some US colleagues, and that it was really triggered from the conversation I had from some colleagues in America, where they were saying that in the US market, and again, like I was saying, it's possibly going to come through into our market, that people are now just thinking a bit more about that risk and using these platforms and the potential financial implications of something going wrong, right? And so there's just a bit more eyes on that area at the moment, I would say. And I think having contracts in place with legal tech vendors is as part of that professional grade versus the general purpose. I don't know what your contract is with that general purpose provider. I think you just get a bit more governance and a bit more security around. You're working with a controlled environment. You're working with a legal tech provider that's working with you as a partner, that trusts you and works closely with you to get the best service for you and your client. And it's just something that, like I said, got triggered. I was talking to a colleague literally last week about it over in the US, and they were just saying, yeah, there seems to be a bit of an industry popping up around this space, and it's something to look at. So maybe it's something to, to ask out into other people, but it's something of interest that really triggered me as well.
Interesting. And we're going to come on to talk about all sorts of stuff. But obviously it's interesting that in the case law that they don't talk about, they don't seem to differentiate. I mean, I haven't poured through every inch of every single case. I'm not beyond. I used to be a litigator, and I haven't done that for a really long time. Thank goodness. There's a reason I don't do that anymore. But like, it seems don't seem to differentiate. They seem to warn against the use of AI tools. When in these cases with hallucination, the courts seem to be warning against the use of AI tools. They don't seem to. I mean, there is a lot of reference of ChatGPT because quite often it is ChatGPT, but in the judgments, which we're going to come on to talk about in a bit, but they don't always differentiate. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. So look, we just grabbed a couple of headlines that we kind of pulled off online, and just really kind of to make people have a little think about it, really. And Tim, we were going to jump into one that you knew about, the High Court judgment.
Yeah, I think this might be the one you were leading to, Caroline. It's not the only one in the UK. These cases where hallucinated judgments or cases or quotations from case law are appearing, and this is, I think, probably the most famous one at the moment. I'll be your law school lecturer just for a minute, if you can forgive that.
No, I mean, is this the Haringey one?
Haringey, yeah, and Yinde. Looks a bit like this.
I mean, there's the borough of Hackney, wasn't it? The Ayenda, yeah.
And Haringey, yeah. So I think this is, the most notable case in which the spectre of fake cases, fake hallucinations, or quoting from a case where that case didn't actually say that, has appeared. Handed down in June, the court under the Hamid jurisdiction, considering the conduct of two practitioners who had cited fake cases which didn't exist, within earlier submissions to the court. I think this is the most complete kind of account yet in a judgment of where generative AI sits in this space. Key bits, paragraphs 6 to 9. The court kind of gives later on, I think this is really interesting as well, a kind of potted history of fake citations from various jurisdictions. It talks in the appendix about cases in Canada, in America. So this is, a thing. It does happen. And what the court spelled out was that, I'll stop sharing my screen. Stop being the law school lecturer. What the court spelled out was that generative AI, powerful technology, which will have a continuing and important role in litigation in the future. I don't think many people doubt that, but it creates risks and opportunities. It has to be used with lawyer oversight and nowhere more so than with legal research. I quote, freely available generative AI tools trained on LLMs such as ChatGPT are not capable of conducting reliable legal research. Reliable sources include the databases of legislation.gov.uk, Bailey, and the National Archives for Case Law, and reputable legal publishers. So there does seem to, at least as far as the sources go, there does seem to be some distinction as to where the legal research goes for. And finally, lawyers remain responsible for what they cite. So yeah, really important case. And I think, if you haven't heard of it, that is a judgment to read. I don't think it's the last of the kind of fake citation cases we will see by any means. There was another one handed down at the end of last month, but I think it's an interesting question. I'll share my screen quickly again, as to how we kind of deal with this. And this is the benefit again of having a reliable database, reliable bundle of sources by which not just that your research is pegged or limited, but also by which you can grade it against. So within CoCounsel, we have a tool called Extract Citations. And typically we use this on transactional documents, leases, SPA here, whatever it may be. And we just run a quick scan. Westlaw tells us at a glance, that's good law or it's not. Again, we'd expect to see statutes here, but look what happens if we put that Ayinde judgment into it. Works just the same way with cases as it does statutes. You see down the bottom, we start to see these U's and M's. So the U's are unverifiable and M's are mismatches. If we click those, this Ibrahim case, the court goes on. Seems to me to be homological was there. It was a case of Ibrahim does not exist. It was a fake. So again, with the right tools, we can just flush out these hallucinated cases which don't add up, and or never existed. And yeah, again, I think the right tool, again, professional grade, can be part of the solution. If generative AI, the court has specified freely available sources there. Typically, it's not just them; it's their misuse. The idea of just putting something off and filing it away with the court. I think to almost all lawyers that seems like a poor instance of practice. But we can also provide the solutions as well.
Do you have? I'll come to some questions in a sec. Thanks, and please jump in if you are using either tool for legal research. In fact, why don't we just ask? I'll come to the question and then I'll come to mine. Otherwise, I'm prioritising my own stuff. So, what expectations will be set about the use and capabilities of AI tools if lawyers are indemnified for relying on inaccuracy? So, there's another question about indemnification. That question, that point, Ben, has obviously piqued some interest.
Well, I mean, I don't know the answer right now. That's the reality. I think it's something that's a rolling conversation that I think, I guess from my side, I'm very lucky. I get to see the industry at 50,000 feet, and I like to take and pick what I hit, and I think it's just something that we might just want to people start to think about in a bit more detail. Is what does that mean for me? What indemnity am I working with, and and what's the impact of using it in the right way and the wrong way? So. Let me put your answer on a postcard when I thought about it a bit further. How's that for you?
Have you done, or is there? I know there's been lots of benchmarking, and then a lot of criticism of benchmarking. There's a ton of stuff that's been done in the industry, and it's all really helpful. And it's kind of like part of this journey that we're talking about. Like none of it's perfect, but it's all kind of valid, interesting. But have you done sort of? Is there side-by-side comparisons? I know that it's not all about just the output. You're talking about what goes into it, and the sort of the service element and sorts of. But have you done the side-by-side comparison in terms of recently, in terms of the output?
So I think we that is an interesting question. So I think at the start of the year there was like the VARS report that came out, and that was done as an independent. Let's call it independent, and I think those will become paramount to the success of all of these platforms. TR's not going to, TR will do its own report, but there's always going to be a twist, right? It's their data, it's their report. But I think the independent piece is really important. And I think TR, Thomson Reuters, should be held accountable to that accuracy level. And I think every legal tech vendor in this space should be held accountable. And those accuracy reports should come out and be showcased, right? Because that's how we're always going to be getting better as an industry in this tech space, is looking around the competition, looking around what's available in the open market, the closed market, and building on that success all the time. So I'm a big fan of like being benched against everybody. And, there's going to be accuracies in certain areas over other platforms, right? And that's just how it goes with the tech and the focus in this subject. So I'm a big fan of it, and I think we should continue doing it.
We could do with another new one, because that was a while ago. Like you started out by saying these things move so fast and the tech develops so fast. That was like months ago, and these things become out of date almost instantly. So we could do with another one.
I think so. I think if you think about the market, say, and I'll give you a brief example. I went to a tech show not long ago, and every other booth was an AI booth. A year ago, I went to the same event, and every other booth was some kind of automation workflow booth. So the world has changed, right? And so the number of options in the market now are beyond comprehension in terms of where you start. So I think you're right. We need another one. Maybe you should campaign for it, Carol.
Can we talk about, did you have more on here? Because I wanted to ask about, so there's some interesting data on who's using what technology, which I think is important. And I think some of that comes from your own data. Some of it comes from ILTA did a really cool survey recently, which does some, they have interesting stats. Was there more?
Absolutely. Yeah, I can absolutely get to that. So look, I mean, really just to kind of close out some of that conversation we're having, one of the underpinning secret sources for us at Thomson Reuters is our content, right? And it's no secret. It is a big part of the business for us, but also more importantly, it's the big part of what the lawyer uses day by day. And just to kind of round that out, if we think about the most basic terms at the moment, practical law, historically, lawyers would use practical law with a keyword search. They would be searching for the content. Now, using the technology of AI, the lawyer can pretty much have a free-flowing conversation with the platform to extract the right information and the right guidance. Really important for us. So let's move on to some data points for you. So when we're looking at adoption at the moment, so this is part of our Thomson Reuters Institute. We canvass law firms around the UK and the world periodically throughout the year. We did a study about halfway through the year now, and there was about 1,500 law firms that replied back. And so we've got good sets of data here. So one thing that's really paramount is that adoption. It is doubling really quickly. And about 28% of respondents said they're already using AI, and 14% were saying they're planning on using it, and they're considering it about 36%. So a really good positive move this year compared to last year around the adoption. And so we're seeing some really good growth in this space. Corporate legal are really on the heels of law firms still. If you think about AI as a subject, or no, legal tech, it's never been easier to buy, to deploy, to use than anything before. If you look at other tech companies out there outside of AI, there's always, challenges around it, but AI is so much easier. So, and corporate legals are really using AI for some really cool things, and in some cases using it to hold their law firms accountable for the work they're actually doing, which is a really interesting subject. Okay, so in terms of other components we've got here, how often is it being used? So about overall, so 19% of professionals reply back saying they're using it multiple times a day, or at least daily, about 23%. And we're kind of drifting to the right-hand columns around that usage chart where they're infrequently using it, about sort of 20%, 21%. And so those are the kind of the people who are just learning and sort of adopting it. But really, we're seeing a nice growth and a nice number around that daily, multiple times a day usage. So it's really positive. It's not where we as an industry want it to be, but I think if we were to future gaze next year, Caroline, I think those orange charts, those darker black charts would be a lot bigger. And that's a really positive sign for where we're going in the industry. Now, in terms of the adoption of public tools or generic tools, let's brand that, versus industry tools, about 35% are already using open source or such as GPT in their day-to-day life, right? So it's the most accessible. You download it on your phone, you can get it pretty much everywhere. And so it's a great entry point to market, as I was saying. About 20% of our respondents are using paid services, right? Paid legal AI technology through us or other vendors. And then, which we're not talking about today, but there's about 14% said, hey, we've also using our own proprietary AI platforms. And that's a great industry growth that's happening, where law firms are looking at the tech in the market, looking at the cloud services, looking at the options on the market, and looking at building their own. But where it's cool as well for us is when we look further down this chart around where they're considering to use it or planning to use it, is around a nice growth around that 35% in the paid services are considering using these tools. So we're really in this space at the moment where law firms are hammering out their strategy. They've probably looked at open source like ChatGPT or other options, and they're going, right, let's look at the paid services and let's start to benchmark, and ultimately the clients will take the lead from the results that they see. So they are doing their own comparisons. We spoke earlier, Caroline, about, should the market do more comparisons? But when we're going to market to a law firm, yeah, they're holding us to account against other tech vendors and products like GPT and other platforms they're already using. So it's really buoyant and exciting for us, and it's great to be involved in. Bit stressful sometimes, but it's a good market sway. And I think anybody in the industry who's looking at this webinar who's not yet looking at stuff like this, you're not alone, but don't be afraid to start probing and trying some of the technology in the space, because it really is making a big difference to law firms in the main.
Why?
Finally, yeah, go for it.
Can you go back to that slide?
Yeah, of course.
Why does it drop to 4% planning to use, I wonder? And then it stays roughly, well, it drops a little bit as well in terms of paid legal solutions, in terms of who's planning to do what. It's quite curious, that one, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. I kind of thought the same. It's like there's
already using
there's
a
not.
ton of public,
Yeah, so they're saying here basically 4% saying we're planning on using open sources, but we're not using it yet. But there's more of a sway in terms of considering to use it as well. So bit of a mythical, questionable answers there. I accept that, but I think that's why I drew you straight down to column row 3 and 4 because there's definitely a better story to tell.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So look, the use cases, top 3 in the industry at the moment: legal research, summarization, review, and drafting. Those are still the top 3 use cases that we and the market is telling us are the main use cases. And I guess that question, coming back to the subject of where we're at, is looking at those 3 challenges, and I guess maybe it's a question for you, Tim, as an ex-practicing lawyer. Would you conduct those 3 use cases without the underpinning a guaranteed information around Westlaw and practical law? I'm hoping the answer would say no, right? That's what you really want, the trust to back what you're trying to do.
Absolutely. And I think it's a really interesting point. It ties another sort of little pet piece of interest I have as well around who actually uses generative AI and where. And the legal research, the document review and summarization, for example, often it's the most senior lawyer in the room who may be the best placed to judge that. And actually, potentially a free kind of service may be in safe hands with them because they're really well placed to see, no, that case doesn't exist, or that's absolute gobbledygook, or that point, okay, that just about holds up. But obviously, like, it's where you're using these tools to really supplement your practice, and that could be asking questions which you don't necessarily know the answer to, and that's really where you need a reliable data source and the ability to verify those citations. And that same principles apply for the drafting and the review as well.
Absolutely. So look, I think just in the element of time, I think maybe Tim might be worth just showing a few of those citation references we spoke about in what we're doing today.
Yeah, sure. Quick.
Is this the demo bit? Can I just be clear? Because this is a demo.
Yes.
Does anyone have, before we jump into the demo, like, does anyone have any questions? Does anyone want to, like, does anyone using ChatGPT? Is anyone using Thomson Reuters? I wanted to share with you before we jump into the demo, because the ILTA survey that I referenced, actually co-counsel came out pretty well, really. So
fantastic.
In terms of, and I just wanted to compare the sort of stats. So is your firm using Gen AI tools? 80% came out as yes. Top of the list was Copilot with 68%. Then it was Co-Counsel Core from you guys. Then Westlaw AI assisted research. And then interestingly, a bit further down, you got ChatGPT in your Azure tenant, which we haven't necessarily sort of touched on too much in terms of having like a private ChatGPT, and also ChatGPT public, and they were both 21%. So they're both, both being used, both came out with the same stats. But what was quite interesting, this is why I wanted to bring it up rather than just reading stats at you. So interestingly, for firms under 50, they were the most likely to use public ChatGPT. So that, and it was significant. It was 33% were using public ChatGPT, and only 9% of firms of 700 lawyers and over were using public ChatGPT, which I just thought was quite interesting, and probably maybe not surprising, to be frank with you, but I just wondered if that accords with some of what you're seeing.
Yeah, it does. So, and I guess we often talk about this one, and it's just that how it goes in terms of those organizational structures. But when you look at the smaller size of a law firm, they don't have the same. Well, they do have the same challenges, but they don't have the same overarching challenges that large law firms have. So large law firms have lots of different platforms to operate in. So integrations becomes a challenge. Maybe data sovereignty, working on an international market. They've got their own guardrails and the types of work they're doing potentially around different sectors. So whereas the small law space around sole practitioners and that kind of different legal challenges, they do have challenges. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, it's just different. And so we see that all the time. The higher up the ladder you go, the more complex a law firm becomes. And when you get complexities, you need a platform that is able to bend and evolve and twist into that framework of a law firm to get the job done. And in the small space, we don't have those complexities.
Yeah, 100%. But it's interesting, and there's So some stuff in the chat which we'll come to, but so you still need to check, right? Like in terms of workflow,
Yes.
one of the things with, I think you talked about services. I'm not sure I'd put it in those terms, but what I would say is that something like co-counsel as part of your work can be part of your workflow, right? Like, so I think that's the essential thing, and particularly with the way that AI is evolving and with agentic AI, etc. Like, you're going to need it to be part of your whole workflow. You don't want something separate, you know, that you're having to go to. This is not where you're going to get the maximum. Oh, sorry, just whacking my microphone. It's not where you're going to get the maximum benefit. But you still need to check, right? This is something that I host quite a lot of things. You know, I hosted something in person the other day, and we just were saying, you know, everything makes mistakes still. You know, we're not really at that point yet where it's completely perfect.
I agree. I mean, Tim, you as a lawyer, you would always check your output, right, regardless of the technology, because
Yeah.
you're on the chopping block otherwise.
And I was a half decent lawyer. Of course I did.
Tony
But yeah,
Hart.
that's entirely right. And again, this is something the High Court said in that Inde judgment. And it said, you know, you have to check the output of these things just as you would a junior employee. If you're, you know, leading barrister, you check that of the junior. Likewise, if you're a partner working on a particular deal, you check what your trainee gives to you before you send it to the clients and the court, whoever it may be. And it's exactly the same principle. Like, the lawyer, the lead lawyer, is the person responsible here, and it's the LLM, the AI, whatever you're using, assisting that lawyer. Doesn't take that place, but it's equally in a kind of supportive role, and that's why it has to be verified.
Yeah, I really want to come on before you're done. We've got time, so I really want to come on to ask you a question about Copilot. Actually, people using Copilot for research. But so this question. So I'm just going to read the whole thing out. So I recently saw a tool built to provide legal advice on contracts, etc., for the general public, as opposed to lawyers. I would imagine a lot of general AI usage is for the general public to get legal advice. In the first instance, how do you foresee these tools, which help the general public but are legally trained, affecting the future for legal firms and the work they do? It's an interesting question. I mean, it's existential. We're going.
Yeah, I mean, look, they're all going to get better, but it still comes back to where's the lesson, where's the learning coming from, where's that model being built from, and how is it giving you that information? So look, the truth is there's some great tools in the market, right? And as a lawyer, you know, the menu option is massive, and I think we've worked with some firms who have said to us, do you know what, Ben, like, Copilot does, you know, 5, 6 out of 10 things really well. Cool. Use it, right? It's yours, right? Get on with it. But they then come back to us and say, but when we get into the complexities of a complex case, or we need to verify against some pretty detailed research, we need you. We want you to help us. And that's the divide. Would you say, Tim?
Absolutely. I mean, another thing you hear about from practitioners now, and it depends on the firm and who they service, but you do hear of this phenomenon of clients come to them with a ChatGPT generated will or lease or piece of advice and saying, can you verify this for me? And you've got this kind of almost cottage industry of your lawyers checking agnostic LLMs work. Now, that isn't commonplace by any means. And oddly, it is generating some work for the lawyer, but it's, you know, is that saving clients time and money? Honestly, I don't think so. Again, I think the better argument is putting the right tech in the lawyer's hands. And, you know, where there are efficiencies to be gained, that's where the benefit of that will come through.
Making sure that they're using the right tools for the right things. And obviously there's a cost element to this because you can't necessarily buy everything. But for example, if you're using Copilot, I think people need to be clear. I mean, there's this new tendency, not even new now, but to hand people, unlike in the past where you'd have a problem and you'd find a tech to solve that problem, there's a big tendency now, not surprisingly in a way, to hand people the tech and go, work out how to use it, you know, which is very uncomfortable for a lot of IT people, and just everything goes against everything you've been taught. But I do see, and I've seen this firsthand, people using it arguably for really, like, they are using Copilot for legal research, and it's not, I mean, what would you say about that? I think that they have to be.
So I was working with a firm. I had a coffee with a firm a couple of weeks ago, and their knowledge manager was with me, and she said the same thing. And she was like, "I'm really nervous that we are," and this is a knowledge manager, 20 years in the industry, a career built around information and giving the right information to lawyers at the right time. And she was quite nervous that the adoption of general purpose AI was good, right? They were using Copilot, but she was saying, I'm nervous about the output in terms of what that makes. Is it the right information? Is it verified information? Where's it coming from? And I think that's something that, again, maybe for another time with some knowledge managers around a table to really gauge that opinion would be a really interesting subject, because that's their industry. That's what they provide the law firm, is that, that gated information of governance, the precedents, the holy grail of that law firm. And we're trying to match that with the Westlaw and the practical law information to help the lawyers get the best out of it.
I'm sure there might be questions about your demo, so I want to give you the chance to do that. There's a question in the chat about an AI course. Maybe one of you, if you know of one, you could answer that in the chat. But Tim, do you want to do the demo, and then I'm sure either there'll be questions or I'll have questions.
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much, Karen. And this is quite brief, but we've done this less for sort of product placement, more just to show how it works and how a professional grade system, please forgive us for using our own, kind of reflects these kind of qualities. So here we go. Just this is quite basic stuff. I've uploaded 7 different pretend witness statements here. Very basic prompt. Please review any evidence which these witnesses give about board approval of the commission payment. The backstory here, I don't want to make it sound too much like Cluedo or something, but there is this kind of missing commission payment, and this is the output you get back. So again, you're told what each witness says, statement by statement, but it's these footnotes. Just pull back the exact extract of the particular document co-counsel is talking about, highlights that for us at a glance. Nice way not just to verify that output, but also in a long, complex document set, really good way to navigate us around those documents. So they're just a very basic example of how professional grade is set up and can help us work that bit much more efficiently and with the ability to verify. But I want to show as well how that works within the world of legal research as well. And I think there is something to be said here too about the different qualities of this. So we talked about kind of legal research and its ability to find the right answer, depending on the type of sources it goes to. And that is all true of what we can do in professional grade as well, where we're hooked up to something like Westlaw, for example. It just goes to Westlaw, retrieval augmented generation, doesn't go to some weird bit of the internet to pull in. But it's also this sifting exercise as well. And this, I think, adds to the accuracy point. It's getting kind of an initial tranche of information to us, whereas before we'd go and browse different practice notes, different pieces of legislation, cases, whatever it may be. Here, the experience is more that co-counsel brings that to us. So I've just asked about proceedings under the Competition Act 98, legislative provisions relevant to the application for injunction to the tribunal, and which principles will the tribunal apply. It's gone to Competition Act 98. As you'd expect, these are direct links to the relevant Westlaw pages. And again, just pulls back at a glance. Easy way to verify from this particular bit of legislation what co-counsel is telling us. We talked as well about foundational principles here. Classic law school case, American Cyanamide, and it's in a competition context, so it's talking about Eurospares and the Sports Direct case. And again, all there, bringing it to us, we get those links rather than having to go to them. But again, it's not just the accuracy point we're talking about, it's also that point of kind of convenience and efficiency. When we talk about RAG, we don't just have to go to a particular repository, be that Westlaw, be that Practical Law. We can also target particular sources as well. So Chitty on Contracts, famous commercial law handbook. We can ask co-counsel now, what does Chitty say? So target a specific book, could be the White Book, could be the IDS employment handbooks. What does it say about the differences between distance and off-premises contracts and gambling law? Don't ask me what that means. I just picked it as an example. But look, we source Chitty and only Chitty. And that would take us straight through to the relevant part of the textbook. So again, this technology, particularly with things like legal research, those very, very kind of profession-specific tasks, it's evolving all the time. Westlaw AI-assisted research, practical law search and summarize, they're being trained all the time. We're constantly refining them so we can have functionality like this. And, Chitty is a Thomson Reuters book, so the others are listed. Other vendors have others, of course, but, I know those don't exist or aren't accessible on Google.
Thanks. How I mentioned the quality of data earlier. How, and you do a ton of work, how important in this is that enrichment of the data in terms of the output? I mean, one of the things, I suppose, just as my observation, is that people feel there's so many layers to this, but people feel like AI can now, you can just have a whole load of nonsense and AI will produce goals, right? We do know that AI can help to create better metadata, to do classification, but the point is that that great quality data is going to produce much better quality output, right? Like so to what extent do you think it's important that you enrich the data?
I mean, I think I can say from my experience with, say, practical law search and summarize, say 9 months ago, it was good. Like, it would give a good answer most of the time, but often you could say, oh, I wish it included, maybe it could have included that point of view. Like 9 months later, from all the training we've been doing with practical law editors, all experienced lawyers, you really see the benefit now. Like it is so much better is the wrong word. Richer probably is sort of going that way, but much more reliable. The answers are more thorough. Obviously, the underlying data is also always changing. Practical law is always being added to, always refined. We're always finding better ways to surface the right quality of data. A crude example is, a outdated practice note obviously doesn't feature within the practical law search and summarize source, but you can't make those kind of guarantees elsewhere. Again, it's having lawyers under the hood here at Thomson Reuters and being able to steer the tools in a certain way, which really assists that output. So, I mean, I can see it with my own kind of eyes, but I think that is what clients are telling us as well. It's really improving and it's only going to go better.
Yeah, because with ChatGPT, I do think, I mean, we've all agreed that some of the stuff, it's just amazing. But actually thinking about it, those are the real risks. Like, so in terms of pulling out of date, like that sort of, you just can't be 100% sure. So I suppose you then will have to do quite a lot of work on top of it in terms of ascertaining the sort of verifying the case law, etc. Whereas with your platform, that work is already done for you. So it's not going to be surfacing sort of out of date or information. Is that right?
Exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Caroline, there's a great question that popped in around publicly available primary legal sources versus the TR content. I think that's a really great observation. Look, so TR has launched with this last year or two with its integration to co-counsel with Westlaw Practical Law, but I'm quite lucky. I get to sit within the product space as well, and the roadmap for TR with co-counsel will be to partner with freely available content, especially across the European space. We're working with some really great, exciting partnerships that will get launched into 2026 that will encompass both the TR information, but then pay open source, freely available stuff to bring into our platform as well. So, we as an AI platform, we started with content already on tap, right? Whereas other AI platforms in the market, like the one being referenced there by Gary, didn't have any content, so it went out and got connected to the content. So we're kind of doing it in a different order to surface the most amount of Thomson Reuters clients as we can in one go, which is led by Westlaw and Practical Law. But I'm confident to say, as we go into the evolution of the product, more content will become available. There'll be more LLMs. There'll be more feature-rich choices to give you that experience, backed by the editorial suite and the technology around co-counsel. So pretty exciting for us. But I think as an industry, like I said at the start, what we're talking about now is probably going to be out of date in 12 months. It is that wild right now, Caroline, in terms of where we're going. So I would say to everyone, hold tight, enjoy the ride, and let's see where it takes us over the next couple of months into the next year.
We all just want to retire, really, don't we, Ben? That's it. Like,
please.
That's it. I'm just going to go to the Maldives and get Gen AI to do my job for me.
Don't wish your life away, Caroline. Come on.
I think that's probably a good point to finish on. I mean, that's a great question. Thank you. I do, and you know, like you say, this is moving so fast, and I do think those integrations that you talked about are so exciting to see. You know, like I think that there's a big question. There's a lot of talk about platformization and like where people, what's going to be the platform of choice, and I think integration is the way forward. You know, in terms of particularly start to look at agentic AI, and then there's all sorts of developments that we haven't even talked about, you know, in terms of like what firms are doing with MCP, and you know, like
so I'll give you something else, Caroline, very quickly. No one's talking about is we obsess about the lawyer's experience. What no one's talking about is the lawyer's client's experience with this subject. Really exciting for us. We're launching the HiQ integration next week at Legal Geek. We're going to start to bridge that into it. So if you have HiQ, you can bring your client data into the platform. You can interrogate it. You can work with your clients in the HiQ environment, giving them an AI experience at the same time. Really exciting. And I think that's something that lawyers might want to switch tact around. We're obsessing about the lawyer's experience, but we need to start thinking about the service we're giving your clients. Okay, we're talking about time saving. We're talking about accuracy, but actually from an experience perspective, where's the market going to go next? And I think that as a subject is really exciting for me anyway, but because I like to think about our clients more than myself. So yeah,
we talk about clients quite a bit, and it's fascinating. I was talking about them just yesterday at a conference, and you know, about the amount that clients, you know, either law firms take charge or the clients will, because they're already in RFPs starting to demand what tech stack, rightly or wrongly. I'm on the fence about that, but anyway, they're like asking what tech stack law firms are using, and they're starting to base some of their selection on those responses. I think there's an element of going back to the days of, you know, like many years ago when they were going, what innovation are you doing? Do you remember, like that donkey's years ago?
Indeed.
I think there's a question. Do we want to do that one? Is the time? It's like we've got a couple of minutes. So it's going to be quite.
Well, that's a very deep question for 1 minute left on the clock, Paul.
Can we do it in an email to follow?
We will find you an answer and we'll get you that, sir. Thank you, Paul. That's it.
I'll just say, thank you for the question, and I promise you we'll get an answer. It's just we're literally just about to finish. I really appreciate this. Like it's such an important topic. I really appreciate you know, the depth that we went into, and being able to have an open and frank conversation. I think everybody will join me in saying thank you. And thanks for everyone for your questions and your curiosity, as we like to say these days.
Indeed. Great stuff. Thank you so much for your time, Caroline. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Caroline. Thanks, everyone on the call.
Thank you.